More than 50 years ago, a strange little Christmas film quietly changed television forever. When I was a kid, I used to laugh watching Burgermeister flail helplessly in the snow, arms and legs stiff like a broken puppet. Back then, I didn't know I was watching one of the most layered holiday stories ever made. Because behind the warm stop-motion smiles, Santa Claus Is Coming to Town hides some of the darkest and most fascinating secrets in Christmas TV history. So today on Classic Hollywood, we're rolling back that old magnetic tape, dusting off the film reels, and uncovering 7 hidden stories that will make you see this Christmas classic in a completely new light. Number 1. The toy burning scene. Too cruel for Christmas. There's a moment in Santa Claus Is Coming to Town that almost no one forgets. And yet, for decades, many viewers never even saw it. Picture this. The children of Sombertown, their eyes wide, their hands clutching the last bits of color and happiness they own. Little wooden toys, carved with love. And then, one by one, those toys are thrown into the fire. The flames roar higher. Reflections dance across the children's faces. And for a second, you can feel the silence, that heavy, breathless quiet that only comes when innocence collides with cruelty. This isn't your usual Christmas cheer. This is heartbreak in stop motion. One animator later said, "We didn't realize it would look that heavy until we saw it move." They thought they were making a simple scene to show Burgermeister's power. But what they created was something haunting, a metaphor for oppression, loss, and the destruction of joy itself. When the sequence aired in 1970, some parents were furious. Phone lines lit up at TV stations across America. Editors argued that it was anti-educational. And by the late 70s, some broadcasters had made their decision cut it entirely. Whole generations of children grew up watching a version of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town that skipped the fire, that skipped the pain, that skipped the truth. An editor from that era remembered the fallout clearly. "We warned them that children would cry, and they really cried, because that scene hit deeper than anyone expected." It wasn't just toys being burned. It was childhood being taken away, the one thing this film, and Christmas itself, is supposed to protect. From that moment, Santa Claus Is Coming to Town crossed an invisible line between simple holiday fun and something more profound. A story that dared to say, sometimes, even in Christmas tales, evil looks real. A crew member later reflected, almost wistfully, "We wanted to show Burgermeister's power, but what we really showed was something human, the sadness of seeing joy destroyed right in front of you." And maybe that's why, decades later, this single stop-motion sequence still sends chills down the spine. Not because it's frightening, but because it's honest. Even in a Christmas special filled with music, laughter, and warmth, that moment reminds us why we need Santa at all. Because somewhere, in every generation, joy still has to fight its way out of the fire. Number 2. Santa, the wanted criminal. Every December, we picture Santa as the world's most beloved man. Red suit, rosy cheeks, a laugh that feels like home. But in Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, that image gets turned completely upside down. Here, Santa isn't a saint. He's an outlaw. Rewatch the special as an adult, and it becomes startlingly clear. This version of Kris Kringle could have walked straight out of an old Western. He climbs onto rooftops, under moonlight. He sneaks into houses through windows and chimneys. He delivers contraband toys banned by the government. And then he vanishes before sunrise, evading guards and posters that scream one chilling word across Sombertown: wanted. It's a detail most of us missed as kids, our minds too enchanted by the jingles and snow. But as grown-ups, it's impossible not to notice. Santa is being hunted. A critic once said, "If you replace the snow with desert dust, Kris Kringle would be a cowboy on the run." And it's true. Beneath the Christmas glow, this is a story about rebellion, about one man standing against a joyless system. Burgermeister Meisterburger, the self-appointed ruler of Sombertown, bans toys, laughter, and celebration. He rules with absolute control. His word is law. His joy is none. And yet, a young man named Kris Kringle, dares to defy him. Not with violence or vengeance, but with kindness. He sneaks gifts to the children in secret. He smiles through danger. He breaks the law by bringing happiness back. It's small. It's gentle. But in its own way, it's revolutionary. One of the animators later confessed, "We tried to give Santa a little mischief. We didn't realize we made him look like a criminal on the run." In the editing room, when they pasted the word "wanted" over Santa's face for the first time, a staffer hesitated. He said it felt wrong, because deep down, everyone knew the idea of Santa as a fugitive was both absurd and genius. In the 1970 seconds, America was a country wrestling with authority. The Vietnam era, the counterculture movement, the age of questioning the system. And somehow, a children's Christmas special ended up echoing that same spirit. A Rankin-Bass historian later noted, "Kids saw magic. Adults saw anti-authoritarianism. And both were right. The beauty of it is subtle, you never feel preached to. The movie doesn't yell rebellion, it whispers it. Through smiles, through snow, through a man who refuses to let joy be outlawed. And maybe that's why this version of Santa endures. Because he's not perfect, not safe, not sanitized, he's courageous. He risks everything for laughter, for toys, for the right of a child to smile again. When you think about it, that's the most radical thing of all. A crew member once said, "We didn't mean to make a political film, but we did mean to make an honest one." So yes, in this world, Santa Claus is a wanted man. But maybe he always was. Wanted not by the law, but by every lonely, joy-starved heart that still believes Christmas can change something. Number 3. The rooftop scene that was banned. It's one of the most magical images in all of Christmas television. A young Kris Kringle climbing across rooftops under a silver winter moon, his arms full of toys, his breath fogging in the icy air. The camera pans upward, the snowflakes glitter, the music swells, and in that moment, we see the birth of a legend. The first time Santa ever sets foot on a roof. The first time he looks down at a chimney and gets an idea. It's beautiful. It's innocent. And for a while, it was banned. Back in the early 1970 seconds, American television was under intense scrutiny from parent organizations and government watchdogs. Every network was being pressured to make sure their family programming didn't encourage risky behavior, no matter how innocent it seemed. So when the Rankin-Bass special Santa Claus Is Coming to Town aired, and children across the country watched Santa shimmy up a snowy rooftop, the complaints began to roll in. Parents feared their own kids would imitate him climbing their garage roofs, scaling sheds, trying to play Santa themselves. A lawyer at one of the TV stations even said, half joking but completely serious, "We didn't want Christmas to end in the emergency room." A few networks took the line literally. They cut the scene. Suddenly, the story felt off. Santa would enter a house from one shot, and in the next, he'd already be inside. No explanation, no transition. To the casual viewer, it was confusing. But to the animators, who had spent days crafting those intricate rooftop movements frame by frame, it was heartbreaking. A technician remembered, "We spent hours moving Santa a fraction of an inch at a time. We made the snow sparkle. The wind move his coat. Then they cut it." But the rooftop scene was more than just animation. It was the turning point in the story, the moment Santa became Santa. That one climb explains the origin of the chimney tradition, the idea that no locked door could ever stop kindness from getting through. An animator said, "We wanted to show him figuring it out, the joy of discovery. It's like watching him invent magic." To them, it wasn't dangerous. It was symbolic. Santa wasn't breaking the rules, he was bending them for love. Yet in the world of 1970 seconds, censorship, even joy had to pass inspection. A censor later recalled, "We didn't want to see children climbing roofs at Christmas. It was a different time. Safety was the priority." Ironically, that caution only made the myth stronger. When the rooftop sequence was finally restored decades later on DVD and Blu-ray, it felt electric again, youthful, daring, and full of life. There's a kind of teenage energy to it, the same reckless joy that defines the best Christmas memories. That rush of doing something slightly forbidden but entirely pure. When Kris Kringle crawls up that rooftop, he isn't just delivering toys, he's delivering hope. The kind that slips quietly into the world through the smallest of openings, like light through a chimney crack. And that, really, is what this moment represents. Not danger, but faith. Faith that happiness always finds a way in, even when the doors are locked. Number 4. The Forbidden Wedding Line. If you grew up watching Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, you probably remember the beautiful forest wedding between Chris and Jessica, the snow falling like confetti, their hands joined beneath the trees, and that quiet voice of the narrator saying something simple, almost poetic. Chris and Jessica were married in the forest because no church would have them. It's a soft line, barely a whisper, but behind it lies one of the biggest controversies in Christmas television history. When the special first aired in 1970, few people thought twice about that sentence. It made perfect sense in the story. The Burgermeister's laws had become so cruel that even love itself had to go into hiding. The forest wedding wasn't rebellion, it was survival. Two people finding freedom outside the walls that tried to confine them. But soon after the first broadcasts, letters began pouring in to NBC and local stations. Some came from parent associations, others from religious groups. They all said the same thing. Why mention the church at all? To some, the line sounded like an attack on organized religion, the implication that faith itself had rejected the couple. To others, it simply felt too adult for a children's Christmas program. One editor from Rankin Bass later remembered the panic. "We just wanted to emphasize Burgermeister's harsh laws, nothing more." But stations immediately flagged it. They said it touched religion, and that was a big red line. Censors moved quickly. By the late 1970 seconds, many networks had quietly cut the line entirely from their broadcasts. To a generation of children growing up in that era, the scene simply jumped from Jessica's song to the marriage itself with no explanation of where or why it happened. It seemed like a tiny edit, just one sentence, but that single line carried the emotional heart of the story, because without it, something vital was missing: the context that this wasn't just a wedding, it was an act of defiance. It was two people saying, "We will love freely, even if the world forbids it." In this greeting, a Rankin Bass historian later reflected, "If you remove that line, you lose the meaning of Sombertown itself." It wasn't just about toys being banned. It was about people being told what joy they're allowed to feel. The controversy didn't fade quickly. For decades, broadcasts kept the censored version. Even home video releases, in the 1,980 seconds and 90 seconds, were often missing the line. The studios afraid of reigniting old arguments. But time has a way of softening fear. By the early 2000s, with the rise of remastered editions and DVD restorations, the original audio was restored in full. And suddenly, after more than 30 years, audiences could finally hear that single, brave sentence again. And when they did, something beautiful happened. People didn't find it offensive. They found it moving. Because when you listen closely, it isn't about rejecting religion at all. It's about freedom, about kindness, about finding light in exile, a theme as old as Christmas itself. A director who worked on the remaster once said, smiling, "Back then, one line could make an entire studio nervous." Today, that same line feels like the most honest one in the film. And he was right, because the story of Chris and Jessica isn't about rebellion against faith. It's about faith in love. Two people who chose to believe in each other when no one else would. And in that quiet, snowy forest, away from rules and walls, they built something sacred all their own. It's a moment of pure courage, the kind of courage that turns fairy tales into legends. Number 5. Burgermeister, the only villain who's never forgiven. Every Christmas special from Rankin Bass has a moment of redemption. The Bumble in Rudolph learns friendship. Winter Warlock in Santa Claus Is Coming to Town melts his own frozen heart. Even Professor Hinkle in Frosty is forced to make peace before the credits roll. But there's one exception, one man who never finds forgiveness. Burgermeister, Meisterburger. From the first frame he appears, he's the embodiment of control. The heavy crown, the iron laws, the short temper that makes even the smallest joy illegal. He doesn't just rule Sombertown, he strangles it. He bans toys, laughter, and color, replacing them with gray uniforms and silence. When you're a child, you just see him as funny, the waddling man who slips on a toy duck and throws tantrums. But when you grow up, you start to see what he really is. A symbol of something much larger and much darker. Oppression, fear, the small-minded cruelty of authority that wants to control even happiness itself. A Rankin-Bass historian once said, "Burgermeister isn't just a cartoon villain. He's the face of every rule that ever told a child they couldn't dream." And yet, unlike every other Rankin-Bass villain, he is never redeemed. No magical forgiveness. No moment of realization. He simply fades away. At the end of the film, we hear that time passed, that things changed, that joy returned to Sombertown. But Burgermeister, he's gone, not defeated with violence, not forgiven, not even mentioned again. He just disappears into history. One animator later revealed the reason. "We didn't want to end with him dying. We wanted him to just vanish." Because that's what cruelty does. When kindness takes its place, it fades quietly until no one remembers. "I'm wrecked down Rhine." End quote. Another crew member added, "Winter Warlock changed because he met compassion. Burgermeister never does." That was the point. In a way, he's the only true adult villain in the Rankin-Bass world. The others are magical creatures or clowns, caricatures meant for fun. But Burgermeister feels real, uncomfortably real. His laws echo dictatorships, his speeches sound like propaganda, and his fear of toys mirrors the way real-world leaders often fear imagination. A historian of the studio once noted, "He died off-screen softly enough that children didn't notice, but adults felt the gloom." That's the secret brilliance of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town. It never tells you outright what's happening beneath the surface. But when you look closer, you see that the story isn't just about Santa. It's about what Santa overcomes, the idea that kindness can outlive cruelty, that joy outlasts fear. Burgermeister doesn't need to be punished. He needs to be forgotten. And that's exactly what happens. When Sombertown finally fills with toys again, when the children laugh and the bells ring, Burgermeister's shadow is gone. It's as if history itself has erased him, replaced by color, warmth, and music. An artist from the production said, quietly, years later, "One of the tension, and in mating by the tam, to disnated, one, and in mated one, compaded off." He's the only one who isn't forgiven, but maybe that's what made everyone else's redemption mean something. Because if every villain turns good, then goodness becomes cheap. But when one man refuses to change, when his cruelty simply ends, it reminds us that some evils aren't meant to be reasoned with. They're meant to be replaced. And that's exactly what Kris Kringle does. Not by fighting, not by shouting, but by outlasting. When you watch it now, as an adult, you feel that lesson in your bones. That even the coldest laws, the hardest hearts, and the darkest systems eventually crumble in the face of simple, persistent kindness. Burgermeister may be gone, but the joy he tried to destroy still returns every December. That's not just a happy ending, it's poetic justice. Number 6. The Japanese animators behind the magic. When you think of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, you probably picture something unmistakably American. The small-town nostalgia. The old-fashioned voices. The warmth of a 1,950 seconds Christmas card come to life. But here's the twist. This classic piece of Americana wasn't made in America at all. It was crafted in Tokyo by a team of Japanese artists whose names most viewers never heard, but whose fingerprints are on every snowflake, every blink, and every breath of that stop-motion world. During the 1,960 seconds, the production company Rankin-Bass, led by Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass, had a dream: to bring fairy tale storytelling to television with a richness that rivaled Disney. But their secret weapon wasn't in Hollywood. It was halfway across the world at a small Tokyo studio called MOM Production. This partnership began years earlier with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in 1964. Rankin and Bass sent scripts, designs, and music from New York, and the Japanese team, many of them trained in puppet making and miniature photography, built the magic frame by frame. By the time Santa Claus Is Coming to Town went into production, the Tokyo team had turned stop motion into an art form. They used hand-sculpted puppets made from wood, latex, and felt, each only 8 to 10 inches tall, with internal ball and socket skeletons so delicate that moving an arm took the precision of a surgeon, an animator later recalled. We had to move Santa's hand just enough to suggest warmth, but not too much, or he'd look mechanical. We thought of them as living beings. For the snow, they used salt and crushed glass. For smoke, they used thin curls of cotton teased by a breath of air. For moonlight, they layered cellophane over tiny bulbs to mimic the glow of winter skies. Every shot took hours, sometimes days. A single second of film meant 24 perfect photographs. Arthur Rankin would visit Tokyo several times a year, standing in the studio surrounded by hundreds of miniature houses and mountains. He once said, "It felt like walking through another world, one smaller, quieter, and infinitely more patient than our own." The Japanese artisans worked with an attention to detail that bordered on devotion. They weren't just animating characters, they were sculpting emotions in miniature. One craftsman remembered shaping Jessica's hair, painting it strand by strand so it shimmered in candlelight. We wanted her to look warm enough that you could almost feel her heartbeat. Another described the team's pride when the rooftop scene was finished. When we turned off the lights and saw the snow glowing under the camera, we knew it would live forever. But here's the poignant truth. Most of these artists went uncredited on American broadcasts. Their names, written in Japanese, were often trimmed from the final TV cuts to make room for commercials. For years, fans never knew that these Christmas memories, the ones replayed every December, were born from the hands of animators halfway around the world, working overnight in a quiet Tokyo warehouse while snow fell outside the windows. A historian once called it the most international Christmas ever made. American storytelling, Japanese craftsmanship, universal wonder. And when you watch it now, you can feel that dual spirit. The warmth of Western nostalgia, shaped by Eastern artistry, a bridge between worlds. Made out of felt, glass, and light. One surviving animator summed it up beautifully. We didn't speak English. They didn't speak Japanese. But we all understood Christmas. And maybe that's the truest kind of collaboration, not born from words, but from shared belief. That even in the smallest, quietest corners of the world, someone can bring magic to life, one frame at a time. Number 7. The Forgotten Voice of Santa Mickey, Rooney's Christmas Legacy. If there's one voice that feels like Christmas, it's his. That warm, slightly raspy, endlessly kind tone that sounds like it's smiling even before the words begin. The man behind that voice was Mickey Rooney. And for millions of viewers across decades, he was Santa Claus. Mickey Rooney was already a Hollywood legend long before stepping into the boots of Kris Kringle. By the time Santa Claus Is Coming to Town premiered in 1970, he had lived several lifetimes on screen. The mischievous teen idol of Andy Hardy, the wartime entertainer, the comeback actor, the man who had seen the golden age of Hollywood from the inside out. But it was in the quiet confines of a recording studio, far from the lights and crowds, that Mickey found a role that would outlast them all. A Rankin Bass producer once said, "We tried dozens of voices. Some sounded jolly, some sounded wise. But only Mickey sounded human. He wasn't trying to be Santa, he simply was himself. An older man with laughter in his heart and a trace of weariness in his voice, the sound of someone who'd seen both the good and bad of the world and still chose to believe in joy." That balance, the joy, and the melancholy became the soul of the film. When Mickey Rooney spoke as Santa, you didn't hear a cartoon. You heard an old friend. He reprised the role again and again, 5 times across the Rankin-Bass universe. Santa Claus is Coming to Town, 1970. The Year Without a Santa Claus, 1974. Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July, 1979. A Miser Brothers Christmas, 2008. And several small TV cameos that kept his voice alive for new generations. Each time, his Santa grew a little older, a little softer, just like the rest of us. A sound engineer from the 1974 production remembered, he didn't even need direction. We'd say, ho, ho, ho. And he'd do it once perfectly. Then he'd laugh and say, I've been practicing that my whole life. There's something magical about that. Rooney didn't just play Santa for a film, he carried him inside, long after the camera stopped. In later interviews, he often grew emotional when asked about the role. He said, "You know, I thought I was just making a little movie for kids. I didn't realize I'd be visiting families every Christmas for 50 years. If you said matters, a bot of the braise." And he was right. Every December, his voice slips into living rooms like a familiar song, through fuzzy VHS tapes, grainy TV airings, and polished Blu-rays. Generations who never saw Andy Hardy or National Velvet still know that voice. They might not know the name Mickey Rooney, but they know the feeling he left behind. That moment when Santa leans close and says something kind, and for a brief second, the world feels safe again. When he passed away in 2014, fans across the world didn't just mourn a movie star, they mourned the sound of Christmas. A producer from Rankin-Bass once said, Mickey's Santa had something no one else could imitate, a sense of history. You could hear the weight of his years, but also the joy that refused to fade. And that's the magic of it. He wasn't performing. He was remembering. Remembering laughter, remembering childhood, remembering that tiny spark of kindness that the holidays are meant to protect. So when his voice comes on that gentle, ho, 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 it's not just nostalgia. It's a reminder that even the smallest story, made in a little studio half a century ago, can outlive everything else, as long as it has a heart behind it. Mickey Rooney gave his, and in doing so, he became the voice of Christmas forever. So next time you hear the crackle of an old TV or see that familiar clay Santa smile, remember behind that cheerful face lies decades of lost puppets, banned scenes, and quiet brilliance. And that's why Santa Claus Is Coming to Town will always be more than a Christmas special. It's a memory made of wood, light, and a little bit of magic. Merry Christmas from Classic Hollywood.